Alright everyone, well, the holiday season is upon us, but most importantly, the end of the year is coming up. Yep, it's that time of the year again, people. Time to wrap up this year, and of course, look forward to the next year. Yep, time to wrap up the year 2019, and look into the year 2020. Yep, the end of a decade is coming, and another decade is starting. So, starting with, of course, top 10s, 5s, 20s, whatever. Starting with, of course, the top 10 movies that I think are the best of 2019. And keep in mind, people, this is just my opinion, so here we go. Top 10 movies that I think are the best of 2019, plus a few honorable mentions here and there. So, here we go, starting with number 10, Joker. Yes, I apologize I didn't get a review in on this movie. I was very busy, obviously, since it came out in October with Halloween Horror Fest and such and so forth. And you're probably surprised that it's a DC comic movie out of all things, but a bit of a different take. Yes, I was skeptical with Joaquin Phoenix playing the Joker, the clown prince of crime himself, and surprisingly, he pulled it off. Now, for one thing, this is a different take on the Joker himself. It's more about him in, well, a different style. It's obviously R-rated, it's more violent, and with all the controversy and everything surrounding it, it paid off in a way. So yeah, it's obviously not for kids, so it's a different approach, even though it still exists in the Batman universe. You know, in Gotham City, it revolves around him, with his mental problems and everything like that, and with his mother and all that kind of stuff. So, in a way, it worked. And yeah, he pulled the part off really good. And it's directed by Todd Phillips, who's known for directing a lot of R-rated movies, and I think he did a pretty good job. I was well invested in the movie, and as I said before, his performance was probably almost Oscar-worthy. Not fair to compare him with Heath Ledger. It's, as I said, completely different approach, R-rated. Heath Ledger was great, and, well, Joaquin Phoenix was great too. Definitely puts a smile on your face. Trust me, it's good, but be warned, it's not for kids. Number 9, Spider-Man Far From Home. Yes, from DC Comics to Marvel Comics now. Gotta love these, right? And I should also forewarn you, this takes place after Avengers Endgame, but I'll try to keep this spoiler free, but you saw my review on this one, and Tom Holland is back as the web-slinger himself, traveling to Europe, and I ain't got much to say. Performances were pretty good, there were some pretty interesting surprises. It wasn't as good as the other Marvel Avengers movie, I should mention, but I'd say Tom Holland was just as good as ever. I think the relationship between him and, well, a different MJ was a little quirky, but it works. Action's good, good pacing, good humor. It's another good Spider-Man movie, and it was well worth the wait. Number 8, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yes, from the, well, graphically odd but very creative director Quentin Tarantino himself. Yep, the genius behind films like Pulp Fiction and The Hateful Eight. Comes this film, which, yes, it is very long. It's over 2.5 hours long, and it stars big-name actors like Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie, and so forth. And, well, it basically, yeah, there are quite a few slow scenes in this film, building up the character and how, well, he almost plays a downfall in his acting career in Hollywood and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of drama revolving around Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt being a stuntman and so forth, and there's a lot going on. So yeah, it slows down at some points, but it's also really breathtaking at some parts. I mean, I ain't got much to say about it. Again, might be some slow scenes, a lot of build-up, and some narration occasionally which slows the film down, but man, the climactic scene, which I wouldn't dare give away, was freaking awesome. I mean, there's some great humor mixed in. It's rated R, it's by Quentin Tarantino, as I mentioned before, so what do you expect? I'd say it was well worth it. Good payoff right there, man. I mean, did an outstanding job with his typical trademark, but definitely brings in something new to Hollywood. Well worth it, man. Number 7, It Chapter 2. Yes, one of the many movies that I was anticipating for this year, the sequel to the surprisingly really good remake that actually did better than the original. And yes, okay, just like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, this one is very long too, nearly 3 hours to be exact, and I was a little bit iffy seeing how, I wonder how much they can really do with this amount of runtime, but thankfully, it didn't bother me at all. A few slow parts here and there, but for the most part, it did great because, well, you probably know it takes place nearly 30 years after the first one. The kids that you saw in the first movie are all grown up by now. They're all played by different actors, and it does reflect a lot on their childhoods as well. You know, a lot of flashback scenes. And especially now they're trying to take the final stand against Pennyworth himself, the clown, and, well, finish him once and for all. I won't give away what happened, but it does a lot of development and a lot of build up, and it pays off for the most part. So yeah, the runtime and everything may seem a little excessive, but I didn't feel bored at all. It had plenty of scary moments as well as silly moments, and some humorous, dark humorous moments, I should say, for the most part, and it paid off. Of course, like the first movie, there is a ton load of swearing, so be warned parents not to let kids watch this. It's not much different than the first, but I'd say for the most part it paid off. The actors who played the older versions of the kids did really good, and it was well worth it. So, good, funny, scary time. The clown is still just as scary as ever. Number 6. Crawl, yes, from one horror film to another. Yeah, it's been a pretty good year for horror films, I will say, and this one is a seemingly generic title. I mean, Crawl? Well, that's because it takes place in a crawl space under a house during a Category 5 hurricane where the floodwaters are rising with a swarm of alligators coming in, one after another. Yeah. Of course, it's about some woman who's trying to rescue her father during the storm, against all odds. I mean, it's a real great suspense thriller, and you're probably wondering, what, that's it? How much can they really do with that? Well, trust me, for an hour and a half runtime, they can do plenty, and they did plenty enough to really keep you on suspense, entertained, and most importantly, well, scared a few times. It's definitely worth it, trust me. Number 5. Rocket Man, yes, based off of the famous song which is about the life of none other than Elton John. And yes, he's played by the same guy who plays Eggsy from Kingsman. And yes, I find it funny how Elton John is in the second one, the Golden Circle to be exact. But man, he's got a hell of a voice for this. And, well, he's not the first time he's done singing. And, he's done the voice of the monkey from the Illumination animated film Sing. So, yeah, he did a pretty damn good job with this movie. I mean, he looked just like him, he played him really good, and yes, of course, because it's about a musician, unlike Bohemian Rhapsody, which is more talking dialogue scenes, this one has a lot more musical segments, which does seem a little out of place for some parts, but it works though, The musical numbers are fantastic. I especially liked, when he did Crocodile Rock, that slow motion movement was just so well mastered. Yes, of course, you have the, sex scene, which, not to get too carried away with that, but, it may make you feel a little uncomfortable, but, hey, it's just trying to stick true to the source material and what his life was really like, and I think they did a great job. I mean, the actor who played him, as I said, he did a great job. I think he's possibly looking at an Oscar for this one. If not, then I would be really surprised. But otherwise, yeah, great film. Rocket Man soars. Number 4. Shazam, yeah. As I said before, you gotta love these comic book movies, and DC Comics definitely showed that they can improve and do great films, and this is definitely one that exceeded all expectations. I mean, even after the trailer looked a bit cheesy, but thankfully I worried for nothing. It was especially awesome meeting the actor at Comic-Con last year, Zachary Levi, who plays the older version of the kid, I should say, when he gets the powers. And it works out. It's just a fun, entertaining time about an orphan boy who gets the powers and has to fight a villain. Seems pretty basic and straightforward, but it just has a lot of good stuff to it, I love how his foster brothers all filming and videotaping him, seeing what his powers and strengths are. I mean, this is just what any kid would do in real life if they knew somebody they knew got superpowers. And yeah, you just want to post it online. The humor's great. I love its tie-in with the DC universe and everything like that. So, and yeah, this is basically Captain Marvel, DC's version, and it's way better than the Marvel version by a mile. I mean, you can't argue there. So, definitely shows that once again, DC Comics has really gotten more than their act together and starting to make great films. And this is one of them. Number 3. How to Train Your Dragon 3: The Hidden World. Yes, again, I already reviewed and talked about this one, so I ain't got much to say. It's a great close to a great trilogy by DreamWorks Animation. I mean, the characters are just as likable, the dragons are awesome. The villain may seem a bit not as fresh and original, but it pays off though. I mean, the scenery and everything is fantastic and just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I actually almost cried at the end. I mean, it's really a tearjerker. It's definitely one of those third movies that does it right. A great close to a great trilogy. I'm glad I saw it. And I can watch it again and again. It's that great. Number 2. Ford vs. Ferrari. Yes, I didn't anticipate this one. Surprised, are you? No, you shouldn't be, because this one is really good. I'm not usually a big fan of race car events or anything like that, but this one has a really good history behind it. It's a lot more than that. You know, it's about the rivalry between Ford and Ferrari, you know, their near merger and all that, how Ford went through some tough times and how they try to design race cars. And it stars, of course, Matt Damon, who did a really good job, but most importantly, the one that sticks out to me was Christian Bale. I mean, he's no stranger to great performances. He was great in The Fighter and, of course, Batman, even though, of course, he can make fun of that growling voice that he did as Batman. But this film, he did a fantastic job. Again, I think his performance was Oscar-worthy for the most part. The racing scenes were great. There was a bit of humor thrown in there as well. But for the most part, yeah, it was well directed and the performances were great. And even though it was a 2.5-hour runtime, I wasn't bored at all. I was thoroughly entertained and interested in this plot. It's a great story, you know, based on true events for the most part, and it was worth it. Alright, well, before I get to number 1, a few honorable mentions here and there, right? Frozen 2. Yes, I anticipated this one, and you're probably surprised not to see it on the main list, but only an honorable mention spot. That's because, even though the scenery is gorgeous, even though the musical numbers are good, you know, fans of this franchise, I should say, will get entertained by it. But, problem is, it's definitely inferior to the first one. Yeah, it's definitely suffers the typical sequel-itis, you know. The story is not as simple and straightforward as the first one. It's a little more convoluted and a few slow parts to it, surprisingly, you know, especially when you get in towards the end. And yes, there even is an after-credit scene, which I don't highly recommend sitting through, but it's got plenty of good humor. The characters are as likable as the first one, but it's just not as good. A little bit darker for some parts, I should say, as well. But, I don't know. If you like the first one, I would check it out. That's why at least I included it at this spot. As well as the Lego Movie 2. Actually, I reviewed this one, as you can tell. You've probably seen the video, and I enjoyed this one almost as much as the first one. But it's still not as good. You know, the songs are catchy and everything. I mean, they're not as annoying as that one song I couldn't stand in the first one, and it had plenty of good stuff to it. But, again, it is a typical sequel. But, hey, sometimes everything is still awesome. Ugh, even though I hate that song. It's good, though, trust me. Toy Story 4, yes, the sequel to the Toy Story trilogy, which pretty much no longer makes this a trilogy, instead is a quadrilogy that pretty much nobody asked for, probably, but surprisingly it worked out. Yeah, that's why, again, I'm including it on this list. I was initially offended, but rather interested at the same time to see how this was going to be pulled off. And while it's not as fresh or original, it does have some funny moments, like with Forky wanting to go into the garbage can every time, you know, and mainly it focuses more around Woody, really, than anything else. And the other characters are kind of pushed to the side a little bit. So, even though it seems unnecessary, it's still very well entertaining. And it reminisces and shows that the Toy Story franchise can still be pretty strong. Again, it just was not needed. But again, you can still enjoy it. So, take it for what it is. It's still Toy Story. The Irishman. Okay, well, I know this is really mostly a Netflix release, but it actually did get a limited release in theaters. Yes, this film is incredibly long. It's over 3 hours, 3.5 hours to be exact, and it's directed by none other than Martin Scorsese, who's known for directing a lot of epic mafia movies. Goodfellas, Casino, and so forth. I mean, and he's known for casting and reusing a lot of these same actors like Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and Leonardo DiCaprio, even though Leonardo DiCaprio's not in this one. But, yeah, I watched this one on Netflix, and, okay, there's a lot going on in this movie, I should say. It mostly focuses around Robert De Niro's character aiding, you know, more than one mafia. There's always something going on between different characters, and some of them even tie into actual historical events. But once you get down to it, it could be easy to follow. You just gotta be really into this stuff. You gotta expect a lot of cursing, a lot of violence. It's really good. De Niro's performance is great as expected. I think the best performance out of this movie, who really steals it, is Joe Pesci's character. Every scene that he's in, you just enjoy the living hell out of it. Yes, you also got Al Pacino. I mean, it goes on and on. There's a couple of slow dialogue scenes, but in a way, they did a great job. I mean, I like how at one point they make him look younger, because it's a lot of flashback sequences, and how it starts out him in the nursing home, and how he's almost on his deathbed, and everything like that. The way they did the makeup design on him with different ages, they did a great job right there. So, yeah, I'm glad I watched this on Netflix, because honestly, I don't think I'd be able to sit through this all the way in theaters, with the pacing at occasional parts, because it does feel like 3 movies put into one. It almost did a little bit. But overall, I'm glad I watched it on Netflix, because this way I can, in case I gotta go to the bathroom or get a drink or something, take a break, pause button right there, and resume it right where I left off. But it's really good, trust me. It shows that Scorsese still's got it. And the number 1 movie that I think is the best of 2019, you probably already know what it is, people. Yep, Avengers Endgame. Yes, the number 1 movie that I anticipated for this year is my number 1 pick. Surprise. Or you're probably not, no. All I could say is, there's one word for this movie: epic. Yes, again, this is a very long movie. It clocks 3 hours, and you probably saw my review on it, and you probably know what the story is, spoiler-wise, and I shouldn't really spoil too much. Just watch my review on it. First part is spoiler-free, and the next part is, a little more moderately heavy on spoilers. But all I could say is this movie was just worth the wait, especially after Avengers Infinity War, which is also number 1 on my list of last year's best movies. And, man, this one follows up with it so flawlessly, and it starts out depressing at some parts. Yeah, especially at the beginning, because you probably know what happens at the end of Infinity War. So they have to pretty much follow through and end it right there. Even though, of course, it's not the last of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's another movie that takes place after this one. But, man, it was just... I love how it revisits scenes from the previous entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah, it's as much as spoilers as I'll get to. And the final act battle sequence is just, man, unbelievable. It's just nothing like you've ever seen before, and that's why it's number 1 on this list. It's the final moment that you just were dying to see after more than 10 years of build-up from the first Iron Man movie all the way to this one. You'll laugh, you'll applaud, you'll cry. I mean, you'll just absolutely love this movie if you are a Marvel fan. It's just, this is one that you cannot miss, and if you have, man, I don't know what you're waiting for. That's why it's number 1 on this list, and that's my list right there, people. Till next time, keep watching.